Hello friends, today we're going to talk about how to complete a lab report, and we're also going to perform a lab experiment, so stick around. First of all, whenever you complete a lab for me, I want you to do it in one of these. This is a composition notebook. They're extremely inexpensive. You can find them at plenty of places. I like to have them in one of these because they're bound. I don't like things like spiral notebooks and things you're tearing out papers and whatnot. This needs to be something that's dedicated to your lab experience. So, a composition notebook, please. Okay, let's talk about the elements of a lab report. I like to use a mnemonic for this, a memory aid, and it goes something like this. Angry indigo monkeys pelt orangutans with red coconuts. You might be thinking, what in the world are you talking about? Each of these letters at the beginning refers to something in the lab report. Let me show you. The A in angry refers to the abstract. And the abstract is a short summary of what happened in your experiment. You don't have to go into great detail. Usually about a paragraph is fine. The way I like to think of it, the abstract allows a researcher to take a look very quickly and see if that experiment will be something that's of interest, maybe something that's even within the same realm of research. And so an abstract does just that. It gives an overview of the experiment. The I in indigo refers to the introduction. The introduction is where you might offer some concepts that need to be understood for this experiment, or some definitions of terms. It's also a good place to offer a hypothesis. What you think may or may not happen during the experiment. Remember, a hypothesis is your tentative explanation of an observation. And something that's important to note in all this, you need to treat your lab report as if you are the teacher, as if you are teaching someone how to perform this very experiment. So, it's important to offer some concepts that are necessary to understanding, as well as some definitions. The M in monkeys is for materials. Pretty self-explanatory. You need to make sure that you offer all the materials that are necessary for the performance, the proper performance of this lab experiment. Everything from beakers to distilled water to the heating apparatus, whatever it takes for that experiment to be completed. The P in pelt is for procedure. The procedure is where you get really meticulous. This needs to be a step-by-step treatment of your laboratory experiment. Now, even though it's step-by-step, this needs to be in paragraph form, just as you would in writing a report for something. So, in paragraph form, the complete steps that are involved in that experiment. The O in orangutans refers to observations or data. Sometimes this will just be qualitative information. Today, for example, will just be qualitative information. But then other times we may have quantitative information. We may take a measurement or a density reading or the length of something or the mass. You get the idea. Observations and data, qualitative and quantitative. The R in red refers to results. You may offer calculations in this section, or you may talk about the outcome of what you saw during the experiment. Perhaps this is where you're calculating the density of an object you examined during the experiment, or something along those lines. Finally, the C in coconuts refers to conclusion. The conclusion is where you offer things like whether or not your findings were in agreement with your hypothesis originally. Or perhaps if you have some sort of value that you calculate, is that value in keeping with the accepted value? So you might offer a % error in that case. By the way, if you don't necessarily like this mnemonic, I often tell people that if you can think of a pig shooting bows and arrows, you might also have the same thing in mind. Aim pork. This lab today I like to call the case of the gold penny. Okay. Anyway, when you write your lab report, always have a title. Always have a title first, and please underline the title. Underneath that, make sure you have the date. The date at which you perform this experiment. If you're watching this virtually, then just the date at which you are watching the experiment. Finally, definitely put your name. I need to know whose lab report it belongs to. For today, we'll use most of the components we talked about. You definitely want to have an abstract, which is probably something you'll write after the experiment's been performed. That way you can kind of give a synopsis of what happened. The introduction would be a good place to discuss things like alloys and solid solutions. We will be actually blending two metals together today to form an alloy. It just so happens that those two metals are surrounding a penny. So by the end of it, we'll have a penny that appears gold. Yay! Incidentally, don't go trying to spend this penny. It's no longer really of any use, okay? It's just good for looks. Of the materials, I want to make you aware of two things that are involved here. You'll be able to see the rest during the video, and you can keep track of it as you watch. But sodium hydroxide and zinc powder. These are two of the components we require to make the gold penny. Your procedure, again, should be in paragraph form, step by step of what you see involved in the process we do today. Your observations will be all qualitative observations today. There's not really any kind of measurements that we make in this process. Your results and conclusion will just compress together into one section. This will include any final thoughts you may have about the experiment and the identity of the alloy in question surrounding that penny. That's up to you. Now, you'll be able to see all the ingredients that go into it, and I'm going to make some explanations along the way, but it's up to you to figure out what alloy is surrounding that penny once we're done. All right? Hey, let's go make some gold pennies. As with any lab activity, we want to make sure we are properly protected. We are using sodium hydroxide today, and that's fairly corrosive. So I'm going to use this lab coat to protect me. I'm also going to use a face shield in this case, and finally, gloves to protect my hands. Some tools that are involved in our activity today. We have a hot plate because we're going to need to heat our solution slightly. In this container we have sodium hydroxide, and this is zinc powder. I have some tongs to use for transferring items, some beakers of water for the purposes of rinsing, a lab scoop so that I can scoop some of this zinc metal into my beaker, a torch that I'll use to heat the penny when it's time, and this device produces sparks to ignite the torch when it's necessary. But the most important item in this lab? My pennies, of course. The shinier, the better. To begin, I've got a large beaker here set up, and I'm just going to put a little bit of water in there, and I'm going to add some sodium hydroxide solution to it. And that's plenty. I'm going to add some zinc powder to it as well. And there we go. I'm going to allow that solution to heat a little bit. I don't want it to boil, I just want it to be hot, and that's going to allow my reaction to progress a little better. Now I'm going to carefully place these pennies. I don't want a whole lot of splashing, so I'm going to carefully place these pennies where hopefully we can see what happens in the process. I'll try to stand them up a little bit so you can see the change that occurs during the coating process, where these pennies are plated essentially with zinc, and it causes them to appear to be silver in color. Hopefully you can see the silver coloration on these pennies. Now, it's important to note the copper hasn't gone anywhere. There is still a layer of copper on this penny. But in this case, what's happening is that zinc is covering the copper on the penny. So now we have a layer of zinc surrounding a layer of copper on this penny. In just a moment, we're going to remove that penny, rinse it off, and then we'll begin the heating process, which will allow the blending of copper and zinc. So now I'm going to rinse this penny off, and I'll even use my fingers a little bit just in case there's any zinc residue on the outside, and that should be good. I'm going to dry it off now so you can see that there is a layer of zinc on the outside of this penny. It looks silver in coloration. It's ready for us to heat and to make into a gold colored penny. Now the climactic portion of this experiment, changing this silvery colored penny into a gold appearing penny. You'll notice, by the way, I've taken my gloves off. It's only because I am no longer using the corrosive substances that we were earlier, and I don't want to have these vinyl gloves on while I'm trying to light this torch. To light the torch, I have a sparker, and it provides a spark in order to ignite the torch. So I'll gently turn the gas supply on and then use the sparker to ignite the torch. I don't need very much flame, so I'm just going to turn it down to the lower setting. And then I'm going to take one of these pennies and hold it like so, And I'm going to gently heat this over the flame. Now as I do, I'm going to rock it back and forth just so I can get a good, even heating, consistent heating. So I'm going to rock it back and forth like so until it begins to change color. When it begins to change color, like so, I'm going to dunk it in here, into this water, and it's going to cool it off rather quickly. But notice now, we have our gold penny. So we've had a blending of that copper and zinc layer to give us this gold coloration. And I've got two more pennies I'm going to do this with just to make sure. Here's another one. So we'll heat it very evenly back and forth until it begins to change color. And then when it does, I quench the reaction like so. And again, beautiful gold penny. One more for good measure. Last one. And I can see it starting to change color, and when it does, there we go. Now that I'm done with my flame, I'll go ahead and turn it off completely. And there is my final penny. So I have 3 gold pennies here. And that's how you do it. That is how you make a gold penny. A few things to talk about while we're cleaning up. First of all, any solution that contains sodium hydroxide is okay to put down the drain, but you might want to flush it down with some water just to make sure. On the other hand, no zinc should be put down the drain. It should be disposed of properly. Now, something to be mindful of when we're doing this. The zinc from this experiment can react with air sometimes exothermically. That is, it can start a fire. So you have to be very careful when you dispose of it. It needs to be disposed of in a way that does not involve any flammables nearby. The same goes for anything that you use to clean up afterwards. Say towels that may have zinc residue on them. You get it? Okay. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed watching this and virtually performing the experiment with me. Remember, when you write your lab report, make sure it's in a composition notebook. Please don't use a spiral notebook, and please don't write it on a piece of paper and try to tape it in or staple it into your composition notebook. Just write it in the composition notebook. If you're turning it in via the LMS, I still want you to write it in your notebook, okay? So if you do, take pictures of your pages and submit them now. In fact, you can use a scanning app on your phone, say Genius Scan or Chem Scanner or something along those same lines, to make it into a PDF so that you can submit it a little easier. That's all the time we have for today. Hope you enjoyed watching how to make a gold penny. Until next time, God bless.